Well, today we're going to be talking about a not-for-profit agency that helps those that serve and protect. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter. I'm glad that you could join us today. Rob Michaels is my guest, and we're going to talk about his work with a not-for-profit called Serve and Protect. And Rob, it's good to meet you.
Likewise, nice to meet you, Monica.
Glad to have you on Bridges. So let's talk about Serve and Protect and how you came to start to do that.
Now that's the story right there. Serve and Protect is a work God built and God called me to. I just happened to hang on and be available. It actually started in 1969 when I graduated from high school and went to college for 3 days and decided that wasn't for me and went back to the beach. So God used the dropout, beach bum, to start this. In 1970, I was working at Sears, and a friend of mine, Doug Smith, said, man, we need to go into the National Guard. I said, why do we need to go into the National Guard? He said, because I'm number one in the draft. I said, I'm number 265. You got a mouse in your pocket? And so he talked me into it. I said, all right, I'll do it if we don't have to go infantry or any of that. So we found an MP unit right in town. So I joined the National Guard, was trained as an MP in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
What is an MP for the
Military police officer.
So you're a military police officer.
Yep,
okay.
Yep. And did that, and you're in for 6 years, but you have a civilian job as well. Well, in '73, I was working at Penny selling TVs, and a friend of mine walked by, Tommy Crislip, and he said, you're trained as an MP, right? I said, yeah. He goes, why don't you come work for us? He worked for Norfolk Police. He said, we're hiring. And I said, sure. So I went over.
Sounds like you were pretty flexible about career options.
That's right. So I went over and took the test and passed and became a police officer. And sometimes God puts people in our paths to recalculate our route.
Absolutely.
That's what I call this.
I believe
Doug,
that.
Tom. But sometimes it's not about career choices, it's about life choices. When I went on the police department, I was a Christian. Still am. But
I'm glad to hear that.
Good.
Otherwise, we might have to stop and pray for you.
I got you. I got you. But you get on, and there's not a lot of faith support around you. Pastors don't know what to do.
As a police officer?
Right, right.
Okay.
Pastors don't know how to react to you. They don't know what to say. And you become somebody different. You become hardened and callous in those things.
Are you saying that like police officers might become hardened and callous just because you see so many tough things, harsh things?
First year, you're a different person. And so I become, shall we say, rough around the edges. I wasn't a nice guy. And
Were you a nice guy before that, like when you were working at Sears and Penny's?
Yeah, I was just
But a year as a police officer, kind of your worldview and perspective changed.
Correct.
Even being a Christian.
Absolutely. And God gave me a new partner, a guy named Drew Grant. His dad was chief of police. And the old-time guys are going, I'm not riding with this guy. His dad's the chief.
Yeah.
So I'm being the junior guy. We started riding together.
So you get to ride with him. Yeah.
Turns out he went to high school with my wife, and we became best friends. And we were out one night, and this kid smarted off, and he started resisting, and I grabbed him by his throat, and I drew back. I was going to knock his head in the next week. And Drew put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to hit him. He said, why? I said, he deserves it. He said, probably does, but why don't you choose not to do that? Now, Monica, I'm telling you, that was God's message right then and there. Is that a choice? Either not listen to Drew and say, take a hike, or listen to him, and I listened. And if it wasn't for Drew, I would not be doing Serve and Protect. So we worked in uniform together. We went to the detective bureau together. We worked in burglary squad together. We were partners there. Made a lot of arrests. It was a lot of fun. And I went to hear a guy speak one night at the Tabernacle Church in Norfolk. And by this point, my faith was restored. I was back to where I needed to be, very active in church. A guy named Dan DeHaan He was the chaplain of the Atlanta Falcons and had longer hair, and this is, back in the day, and had a beard, and I thought, this is a cool guy. I'll listen to what he's got to say. God had him there for a reason. He talked about going to Columbia Bible College. And I thought, man, that sounds like something I need to consider. So I applied to Columbia, told my wife what I was going to do. I was married. She said, I think you got to be called to do that. I said, I think I was. I didn't know, but it was God moving me to do that. And so I went to Columbia Bible College, worked at their radio station, and got a bachelor's degree in biblical education, did some teaching and stuff like that. Met another guy named David Maines. He had a program called Chapel of the Air. And David said, well, what are you going to do after Columbia? I said, well, I'm going to go on to Wheaton and get a master's. I figure while I'm on a roll, I better not quit.
Now that you're in school, keep going?
That's right, or I'll go back to the beach. And so he says, well, my dad just sold his agency called Domain Communications. And, you could work there. I said, what am I going to do? He said, you could drive a truck. So I went there and met David Thompson. Now, I'm mentioning the names because God used these specific people to redirect my route. And so I went in and...
But it sounds like you were on quite a route there.
Oh, no.
I mean, my goodness. From
we're not even
Sears
halfway
to
there
Pennies.
yet.
Yeah.
So I went in and met with David, and he says, so David Maines sent you. I said, yeah. He said, what would you like to do? I said, well, I was a cop. I can drive a truck. And we talked for a bit, and he goes, well, I'm going to hire you, but I want you to work on the inside. I said, doing what? He said, I'm going to put you in the agency. And I laughed in his face. I said, are you crazy? I don't have a creative bone in my body. He said, I think you do. And so I went to work in the agency, learned copywriting, learned some video production. During that time, studied with Jerry Rose, our mutual friend, and learned TV broadcasting and production, and finished up at Wheaton, and I was going to go work on my doctorate at the University of Maryland. And so I was ready to, I'm on a roll now.
You
I'm
were
ready.
on a big roll, and God is in it, because the things that you're talking about really only happen in movies. Nobody goes to apply for a job as a truck driver and have somebody say, oh, but we're going to put you over here in this marketing agency, and then you end up learning copywriting and TV production. Yeah.
Monica, I couldn't explain it. I had a guy ask me one time, can't you stay with a career? And so, at any rate, moved to Maryland with the company I was working with, and they went out of business, and I never did start my doctorate, but got a call from a guy I'd done some music business work with while I was in Chicago, and he said, we're hiring a VP of marketing for our record company. Are you interested? And I'd done some work with Sandy Patty and artists like that, the Gaithers. So I met with them, and I took the job here in Nashville. Moved here to do a VP of marketing for a record company. And so learned all kinds of stuff. When I left the record company, I was going to start my own company, Lord and Michael's Entertainment. Had met DeGarmo and Key, and they were my first clients. And ended up, PR was what they wanted more than marketing. So I became a PR company. It's necessity. And was pretty successful, ended up with 24 gold and platinum, multi-platinum albums for people like DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline and Newsboys, and got to work with the top artists. And that was going along really good. Went to work for the Newsboys, kind of shut down my agency, and they wanted me to run Global Tribe, a nonprofit. And so I went to work with them. I'd never run a nonprofit, never worked for a nonprofit. But when I got there, I had to help get the 501c3 set, learned how to do that, got involved with them for 3 years doing that, and was sitting in church one Sunday morning. Somebody had the audacity to take my second row aisle seat.
Oh boy,
I'm a
you're one of
creature
those?
habit.
Oh my goodness.
I'm one of those.
Oh.
So anybody wants to find me, second row aisle. And I had to sit in the front row. And I was praying, and I said, Lord, I mean, because I'd felt the time to change before a couple of times. And so I knew it was God moving. And I said, what do you want me to do? I'm telling you, Monica, everything that I did from the time I joined the MPs till the time that God called me came into play with what I do now. Every skill, every ability, all the knowledge, and serve and protect came to my mind. I went home and put the business plan together, and that was the beginning of Serve and Protect.
That's amazing. So tell us, what is Serve and Protect? Glad
you asked. We are a nonprofit, and in the beginning, I gathered a group of chaplains because I thought, I am a chaplain. I was working with the Fraternal Order of Police.
Well, you're a chaplain. You've done everything.
Well, yeah.
Just about.
Well, and I'm still alive, so we never know what's to come.
Exactly.
But I thought, if we can have a national resource. Well, there already were a couple, but I wanted to recruit chaplains who had been in law enforcement. Yeah. Because, cops and firefighters, we're a strange lot. I mean, we ain't right. So,
well, for someone to get up and go to work every day and put your life on the line and
that's right.
deal with dark issues, that takes a lot of, would take a lot out of a person. So like when you told me when you were first a police officer and in a year, kind of your life perspective had become much darker, I could see how that could happen.
Oh, what you deal with, I teach trauma classes now. I taught 25 for Davidson County this last year. And I can still remember to this day 3 specific accidents that stand out in my mind. Mm-hmm. And one of them was an 18-year-old college freshman broadsided by a drunk driver. Mm-hmm. I heard her breathe her last breath. So you become something different. Well, I started organizing the chaplains, and I was thinking, I need to have a crisis line. So I called an organization up north, and they work with police, and they said, well, we only work in our state. But if you come up with $1 million, we can go nationwide. And I said, well, if I come up with $1 million, what do I need you for?
Exactly.
And so I was at my desk, and once again, God was at work. Mm-hmm. I got a call from a guy named Sean Riley. He has an organization called Safe Call Now. They're a crisis line. And they were doing just Washington State at the time. He said, but I want to go national.
Wow.
And I said, okay, well, let's work together. So he's my crisis line. And what he does is put people in residential care if they need addiction treatment or something like that.
So when you say, because a lot of people watching may not know that a lot of first responders, police officers suffer with substance abuse problems and need help? Or?
85% of those who are in public safety experience some symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. Addiction is not a symptom, it's a byproduct. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if they don't get the help, the symptoms persist, nightmares, sleeplessness, recurring thoughts. So they start taking a drink or two or a pill or two.
To try to medicate that.
Right, and they do self-medication, and that's the problem.
Yeah, well, we've got to take a break. We want you to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to hear more about the work of Serve and Protect.
You can purchase a copy of today's show for $15. Call us at 615-754-0039 or send a check to the address on the screen. Please mention the program number on the screen.
For more information on a guest, visit our website, ctntv.org.
The blood of Christ is the only cure. It gets down to the root of every single thing that ails us. There's not an addiction, there's not a generational curse, there's not any root of sin, there's nothing that the blood of Jesus cannot cleanse.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your event.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about a not-for-profit agency called Serve and Protect and how that agency reaches out and helps those that are first responders and working in roles like that. And so I've been enjoying talking with you about just the journey that God has had you on, Rob, over so many years to give you experience as a police officer. You've worked in stores. You've done just about everything, marketing. You've worked in the contemporary Christian music industry. And yet, really, God took you back to having a heart for those who are first responders, those who serve, and maybe whose world's perspective has become jaded by facing trauma and horrific situations every day.
Absolutely.
And you know, our expectation of first responders and police officers is that they do everything perfectly all the time.
They're expected to.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, it was a 41-year journey. It took me a year longer than Moses to get to the promised land. but you know, sometimes God has to equip us to do what he wants us to do. Yeah. I do a good amount of preaching and teaching. We go to Brentwood United Methodist, and I'm one of their circuit riders. And so I get to teach in different Sunday school classes.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun. Taught in, I think, 15 different ones last year, or at least 15 times.
That's wonderful.
But you know, God equips us for what he calls us to do. Now, after organizing chaplains and after starting working with Sean, the calls started coming. Well, they weren't calling for a chaplain. They were calling because they needed somebody to help them. Mm-hmm. They didn't need to go into residential care, so they needed a therapist in their area. So that's...
And who is they? Who needs a
police,
therapist?
fire, dispatch, corrections, people in public safety. We now work with forensic medical examiners that come out to crime scenes. And so when those professions call for help, when they finally get to that place they're willing, what we do is we started out doing this. We would actually find a therapist in their area, and we'd make sure they took their insurance. And I interviewed every therapist before I'd make a referral because I wanted to make sure it was a good fit. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of our signature. We don't just give them a name and say, go check it out. Because if they get there and the insurance doesn't work, or they get there and the person says, now tell me, what's it like being a cop? They're going to go, I'll see you. Yeah. And so we make sure that works.
Yeah, I would imagine that being your signature is extremely helpful to people because, you know, when a person's already worn out, one more obstacle will just shut them down. So if they show up and the insurance doesn't work, or the person asks a really ridiculous kind of question,
right,
the person's just like, forget it. Nobody's going to be able to help me.
They won't go back.
Yeah.
You know, and so we really make sure that there's a fit. We do follow-up, make sure they went. I mean, sometimes the calls, I had a guy call me on a Saturday morning that I was working with, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm either going to eat my gun or come to Jesus. And I said, well, can I slip on some pants and we'll talk option 2? Yeah. And he came to the Lord.
Praise God.
I had one guy call me one time. He said, and I've been talking with him. He goes, I'm done. I'm going to get a gun now. And I wouldn't shut up. I just kept talking with him. And finally he goes, all right, I'm back home. I'm going to let you say hi to my wife. And so, but you know, God has brought different kinds of people in. So for 5 years, I did that by myself.
That's a lot of
helped
work.
about 3,000 people.
Wow.
And so got a call one day from Dr. Carrie Steiner. And she said, this is what I do. I found your stuff on the internet. Do you mind if I pass it out? I said, no, that's great. And so I started sending her the materials to pass out. And she was a Chicago police officer, 13 years, and got her doctorate in clinical psychology and has a clinic in Wheaton that treats first responders, First Responders Wellness Center. And so I called her back. I said, would you like to be on my board as a clinical advisor? Sure. And so God started bringing people in. I never recruited anybody. Then about 2 years ago, it was hard being the guy on the phone locating people and then trying to run the organization.
Well, you're doing
trying
everything.
To raise funds. Oh, yeah.
And everybody you're dealing with is in crisis or some sort of a problem.
Oh, yeah.
So I can imagine how challenging and just how hard that would be for you.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm sitting at my desk and I get a call. And this girl says, my name's Rose Casal. My husband is a Chicago police officer. And she said, I was leaving work and I was going to listen to Chris Fabry, but he had gone off. So this, Janet Parshall was on. And I was getting ready to cut it off, and you came on and started talking about police, and I couldn't cut it off. And she said, I want to help in some way or be involved. She said, I give out goodie bags to the guys in my husband's district, candies and stuff. She said, can I get cards? I said, sure. So I sent her cards. And about a week later, she called back and she goes, no, this isn't enough. My husband and I want to be in on this. We want to help. And so she started helping with the referrals and finding she's an RN. She knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And since Rose came, she said, let's strengthen how we do what we do. We need, and we started getting people calling in wanting to be peer advocates. I worked to try and get into a specific financial advice organization. And they said, well, you can just point people to our website because officers, run into financial problems. They don't make a lot of money.
Right.
Last summer, I got a call from a guy. He goes, hi, my name's Matt. He goes, I read about your organization. I'm leaving law enforcement. I'm retiring. I said, well, what do you want to do? He goes, well, I'm a master financial planner for Dave Ramsey. I said, he said, can I help? I said, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got just the role for him.
Oh, absolutely. I had Michael DeJesus called, and he was 30 years outside of Miami-Dade involved in shootings. Houston Gas came to us. Houston was shot in the face doing a search. We've got, well, in fact, I'm just adding 2 federal agents that are retired so that when we have federal officers call, then they'll have somebody that they feel more likely to talk with. So I wish I could take credit for building this thing. God just keeps bringing people in that plug in quite well. So our process is when somebody calls in, I develop what we call 360 care. When Sean's organization is putting somebody in residential care, then we have them offering a chaplain for the family while they're at home. And that's an opportunity for them to feel more at ease. When they're leaving residential care, we want them to get a hold of us, and we'll have a therapist waiting for them when they get home. We brought on a guy that is our chaplain coordinator. Rose and Ron Jones have developed a volunteer training manual. And I mean, it's like we're a real big-time organization.
It's like God is just bringing it all together. We're talking today about Serve and Protect, an agency that helps first responders, police officers, and all of those who are serving in the front lines who may be experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, perhaps problems with substance abuse, maybe somebody who just needs a listening ear because of all that they've gone through. And so this agency, Serve and Protect, is working so hard to meet all of these needs. And I just, Rob, as I listen to you talk, my heart gets excited about how much God loves people and how he keeps bringing all the right people to you with the right expertise who want to help those who serve. Well, God has taken us a long way. He's grown me to where I'm teaching seminars for law enforcement and firefighters now. I'm state chaplain for the Fraternal Order of Police, so for the past several years I've been directing our state memorial downtown in May. This last April, I was honored to receive the FBI Director's Community Leadership Award for the Memphis Division, and flew to Washington, and it was pretty exciting. But I'm chaplain still for the FOP. I'm chaplain for a federal agency, and soon to be 2 federal agencies. God has just opened doors to serve. And there's no shortage of people that need help. Let's talk about some of the kinds of things that maybe police officers or first responders are going through, because a lot of people watching may not understand how much stress and what that looks like for a first responder, a police officer, and their family, what they go through. The calls that we get, I had one guy call. He was called to a murder-suicide. It was a mother that killed her 14-year-old daughter and then killed herself. He had a 14-year-old daughter. I had to help one local agency that their deputy committed suicide, and I went down and did a debriefing and ended up meeting the wife of the man that committed suicide, and we worked with her for 3 years trying to help her because she was struggling with wanting to live after his death. But from my own experience, I was a rookie, and we went out to an accident
I got out and went to the car to see if anybody was okay or not.
Right.
And it was 6 people in the car. 5 of them died on impact. And all 5 of them, their heads were leaning back. The college freshman that I heard her breathe her last breath, I pulled up on that accident. I was on the way into the detective bureau one morning, and it was early in the morning. And I looked ahead, and there was a tanker truck laying across all of the lanes of the interstate on that side. And I got out, ran around, and the driver had jumped to get away from the car or the tanker that was flipping, and it fell on him from his waist down. And I talked with him until such time as he died. You know, you experience death. I've been to scenes where an infant was abused and had burns on their body. It's hard. I couldn't work youth bureau.
And I mean, these are just a few of the things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these are just a few of the things that our police officers, first responders, people in those kinds of positions face every single day as a part of their jobs. And of course, people need counseling and need help to go through all of these things. And so we've got just a minute left, but
Yes,
that's what God brought Serve and Protect together for, to help.
We help those that serve. We provide that shoulder, that hand of help. We bring hope. That's the hope. And we get to talk with them about, do they have a faith background? If they don't, they'll say, why? Well, I come from that, and that really helped me.
Absolutely.
If they do, they may have drifted, but we get to help them renew their faith.
And that's what it's all about.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I love Serve and Protect. Thank you so much for coming
Well, thanks for
and
having
for
me.
sharing this story. It's just so important that this kind of work is done. And so I'm just so excited to be able to share with you today about Serve and Protect and how God has brought this together. We're so glad that you could join us. We're all out of time. We've got to go, but we say goodbye and God bless you.
For more information on a guest, visit our website, ctntv.org.
When I truly turned my heart to the Lord, He took every sin I ever did away from me.
God really is your other half. God, He's the only person who can really, fill those holes and cracks in your heart that you're so wanting someone to fill.
It's no good to have a big dream if you're not putting yourself in motion to go after that.
The blood of Christ is the only cure. It gets down to the root of every single thing that ails us. There's not an addiction, there's not a generational curse, there's not any root of sin. There's nothing that the blood of Jesus cannot cleanse.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your event.